agus fáilte hig seminar tróna inniu. Good evening and thank you all for joining. My name is Alexander O'Hara. I'm the National Director for Catechetics. And on behalf of the Council for Catechetics of the Irish Episcopal Conference and Veritas, you're all most welcome to this final webinar in the series Together Along the Way, Conversations on Catholic Faith Formation in Contemporary Ireland. This webinar series, organised on behalf of the Council for Catechetics and Veritas, aims to bring together leading theologians, religious educators and catechists to explore new avenues for Catholic faith formation in contemporary Ireland, inspired by the new directory for Catechesis published by the Pontifical Council for Promoting New Evangelization in 2020. In the large, diverse and complex religious education landscape, directories for catechesis function as atlases that guide educators and faith communities. However, we need leaders and visionaries who help us to interpret those atlases and read the maps they contain. In the run-up to the National Synod in Ireland, we hope that this webinar series will animate and inspire religious educators, teachers, pastoral leaders, evangelizers, and anyone else interested in sharing the best of the Catholic tradition with creativity and conviction. And just to note that this is a public forum and we will be recording this webinar. And I'm very honored today to welcome our final speaker in the series, Ana Martinez. Ana is originally from Mexico. She's been studying in the United States and has just completed a semester program at the Pontifical University of John Paul II in Krakow, where she studied theology of the body, contemporary ethics, and the philosophy of St. John Paul II. And in the future, she hopes to continue her studies in theology at the University of St. Thomas in Texas. Ana has been blind since birth, and she enjoys rock climbing, the Chronicles of Narnia, and Eucharistic Adoration. It's a delight to welcome you, Ana. We met during the recent symposium in Krakow on Christus Vivus in Europe. And you will be talking today on We Are Called To, the Missionary Life of Persons with Disabilities. So over to you, Ana.
Thank you very much, Alex. I'm honored to be here and to speak. Although I cannot speak for every disabled individual, I hope that my experience can serve of help and guidance to those in charge of catechism, but also in charge of parish life, priests, bishops, or even those who are disabled themselves. So to start, I would like to read what the directory of Catechesis says regarding people with disabilities. So it says, every Christian community considers those who suffer handicaps, physical or mental, as well as other forms of disability, especially children, as persons particularly beloved of the Lord, and growth in social and ecclesial consciousness, together with undeniable progress in specialized pedagogy, makes it possible for the family and other formative centers to provide adequate catechesis for these people who, as baptized, have this right, and if non-baptized, because they are called to salvation. The love of the Father for the weakest of his children and the continuous presence of Jesus and his Spirit give assurance that every person, however limited, is capable of growth and holiness. Education in the faith, which involves the family above all else, calls for personalized and adequate programs. It should take into account the finding of pedagogic research. It is most effectively carried out in the context of the integral education of the person. On the other hand, the risk must be avoided of separating this special catechesis from the general pastoral care of the community. It is therefore necessary the community be made aware of such catechesis and be involved in it. The demands of this catechesis require a special competence from catechists and render their service all the more deserving. So that's what the directory says. And I want to start with agreeing with the directory. Yes, every person, regardless of disability or not, is called to holiness and to relationship with Jesus. So because of this, as the directory says, adequate programs have to be made for the education of everybody in the faith. However, I would say that they should go beyond religious education programs. The life of the church, as we all know, is very wide. So it's not just religious education. It's about retreats, just normal parish life, mission trips, vocation, all these things that everybody else takes for granted. So those same opportunities that everybody else has should be available for people with disabilities too, regardless of disability. So I want to start with religious education. It is better, as the directory says, to try as much as possible to place students in regular education classes, because that is just going to integrate them into the wider church. And so, like, it is important for everyone to be together in the same place since from early age. So that is very important, but also it's important for us to not generalize either, right? So one student may do well in a general education classroom, and then another student may do better with some extra support. So maybe having an aide to help in the general ed class, or maybe having more like a specialized classroom. So it's important for us to keep this in mind, because even students with the same disability, for example, somebody with autism, one person could be fine in an inclusive classroom, and then another one may need some extra help that maybe another classroom that is more specialized can give them. So it's important to know this, but it's important also to not generalize. So if your first student with autism or any other disability for that matter does better maybe at a more specialized classroom, that doesn't mean that the next student is going to need those same accommodations. So I think it's important for you as a catechist to talk to the parents and to the students, because the students, well, if they're old enough to express their needs and what they want, they know how they can learn best, because they're the ones who have the disability. And also many times if the student cannot articulate their needs, the parents can usually make that help you make that decision. Something very important too is to make class materials accessible. So it's not enough for a student to be in a regular education class. It's important for the catechist to make everything that the non-disabled students are learning accessible towards those with disabilities. So books, they need to be in accessible formats for everyone. So whether that's Braille or electronic or audiobooks or whatever it is very important for those to be accessible. Crafts, games, all these things that really help children learn more about who God is. Those should be accessible for everyone as well, because they are part of the class. Now, if students do need to be placed on a special education classroom, I would really advise to not lower the expectations. Just because a student maybe needs more support doesn't mean that they cannot learn. So for example, one time I went to an evangelical church. I went to their special needs classroom just to see how things were done. And it was kind of sad because I saw a 5-year-old in the same classroom as a 20-something-year-old. And so that to me, like, first of all, the age gap is huge. A 5-year-old, I mean, is a kid almost in preschool, and a 25-year-old or 20-something-year-old, I mean, they are adults, and so they should be treated as adults. So and like the activities in that special needs classroom were very, very limited. It was mostly daycare. Like the teachers there made the students just color and watch videos, and I don't know, like I just wish it would have been a bit more involved, like more of that catechesis, and also with age appropriate peers, especially for the 20-something-year-old, and for the 5-year-old. I mean, who wants to be with an adult, right? So another aspect, and this, like, I'm putting you know, children's education as an example, but like this also applies with adults, where, you know, like RCIA or Bible studies or whatever it is that the catechist is teaching, and whichever age group, I think all of this applies regardless of age. It may look a little different depending on who you teach, but all of this applies to every age, I think. Another big aspect is social inclusion in the classroom. So again, it's not enough for a student to be included in the regular ed classroom. It's not enough for the materials to be accessible, but social inclusion has to happen. And as a catechist, you may not be able to control that, right? I mean, you can control some things, but like not everything, because I mean, you cannot force people to act a certain way or to do certain things. But I can give you an example that can maybe help illustrate what I'm trying to say. So, for example, I'm going to use myself. So if I was a kid and if I were to go to catechism class and, you know, the teachers are like introducing me, you know, if she says, hey, you know, this is Anna, she's blind, she has this really cool, I don't know, writing device that she can make letters with, you know, could somebody help her find a seat, right? And so in the surface, this kind of introduction may look good, right? Like you're making the students kind of aware of my needs, and, you know, you even ask if somebody could help me find that chair and why not. And so you can see the students, like, you know, 10 students kind of helping me out and like, oh, sit over here, and I want to see, you know, your cool writing stuff, and, you know, all the things, right? So in a sense, you can maybe think like, oh, this student is being included, like people are talking to her, and you know, she's included, right? In the surface, that's what it looks like, but in reality, it may not be the case, because there are a couple of things that I would argue are maybe not the best with this kind of introductions, right? So if the teacher says, you know, here is Anna, she's blind, right? So like the first thing that the students are going to associate me is it has to do with my blindness. So like what makes me different from them. And also, you know, you're like, oh, the catechist is like, oh, you know, she has this really cool writing device. So like the intention is a good one, right? Because you want to make the other kids see that like your disabled student is cool too. But that also kind of places that student or reduces that student to what they have. So like, oh, they have these really awesome things that they, you know, that help them. But like, it doesn't let the other kids see who this student really is, right? And so once all the students look at the really cool writing things that I have and the technology and whatnot, then they're like, okay, great, you know, I'm bored. Like, I just want to move on and hang out with my other friends. And then, so the last thing, which is also well meaning, but also I think it's important, you know, like if the teacher is like, oh, you know, who can help this disabled student find a seat, right? So again, that sounds as this could be helpful, but in reality, it also kind of the students with that, like the other students with that statement, may think that because somebody has a disability, they need help. And so maybe that blind student or disabled student, maybe they didn't need help, you know? And so what could be a good introduction, right? So it could be maybe like, hey guys, this is Anna. She, I don't know, she just moved from Poland, you know, period. And then you could ask the student like, hey, do you need help finding a seat? And then the student has the freedom to say yes or no. And also like the other students don't just see this new disabled student as, oh, she has a disability. Like they can see them for who they really are. It may take a bit longer, right? Because they're like, oh man, this student is kind of different, right? But at the same time, this kind of introduction can be powerful because introductions do make either really good impressions or like maybe not as good impressions. And so I think it's important to highlight the things that in this case, children or the students have in common instead of what makes them different. So that's the main goal in the like religious education classroom, just inclusion, social inclusion, accessibility, and also making sure that the students are placed in the room with everybody else, or if they need to, in more specialized rooms. Now, as we already said, parish life and just Catholic life in general is so much more than religious education, right? So it is important for students with disability, or for people with disabilities, to know that every opportunity that is offered to any other Catholic is also offered to them. So the next topic is going to be mission trips. Many times people in general have this notion that people with disabilities are here to be served, and that they cannot serve, that they cannot contribute. It was very interesting because when I first started getting more involved in my faith in college, I wanted to go on a mission trip. But it took me a while to really do it because I just didn't want to fundraise or to pay, $1,000 for the mission trip for me to get there and for people to be like, oh no, we got it. You can just sit over there. I did not go and paid all this money to just sit over there, and so I think it's important for church members to change their attitudes about how they see people with disabilities. Like, like maybe somebody who's not disabled may think like, well, if I was in a wheelchair, I don't know how I would do this, right? And so therefore you may think like, well, if I don't know how to do this, therefore it cannot be done if you're in a wheelchair. Or in reality, somebody who's in a wheelchair, they've lived with it, some for their entire lives. And so they may have strategies and ways on how to do things that we may not be aware of because we don't have that same, we're not in wheelchairs like they are. And so I think it's very important for priests and other church members to like encourage disabled people to get involved in missions and in ministries, right? So like even leading Bible studies, leading things, I think is very important. Something else that I think is important is you as a catechist or as a priest or whomever, the way that you treat a disabled person, especially if you're a person of influence, is going to dictate how everybody else treats them, right? So if you're treating somebody with a disability, especially if you're a catechist or a priest or somebody that people look up to, if you treat them like if you talk to them like if they were 2 years old and like, oh my goodness, how are you, honey, and let me do everything for you kind of thing, people around you are going to pick up on that and they're going to start treating that disabled person just like that. Whereas if you talk to them like normal, like if you would talk, if it's a child, like if you would talk to a child, but if it's an adult, like you would talk to any adult, if you like talk to them like that, and if you trust them with different things, then people are also going to pick up on that and treat the disabled person in a more dignified way. I had a very great campus minister when I was in college. She had a lot of experience just with people with disabilities in general, and so my blindness didn't really scare her. And yeah, like she just talked to me normal, like an adult. If I wanted to take on a leadership role in the college, I mean, I could. Like she trusted me with that. She was if I did something wrong, she of course told me, because I was just like any other student. And so I really appreciated that. And I think that sometimes people are afraid of maybe correcting or talking to people with disabilities because they don't know what to say or how to say things. But in reality, we're just people like anybody else. One more thing that I wanted to touch on is vocational discernment. So as full members of the church, we also have the right to discern our vocation, just like anybody else. It sounds very rudimentary, but it is true. Like there are many, when I was discerning religious life, there were many communities that were very welcoming towards my disability. When I told them like, oh, I would like to discern with you, but I'm blind. They were like, okay, whatever, we're not the ones who call. Jesus is the one who calls you. So, you're welcome to come and visit us, But sadly, there were other communities that when I told them that I was blind, they were just like, oh, sorry, like you cannot. But they did it without asking me any questions, like, hey, how do you do this? Or, what about this, right? Because I would have loved to answer any questions that they had. And unfortunately, many times they were like, no, sorry. And I think that needs to be changed because, of course, discernment, right, whether it's to the priesthood or religious life or any other vocation, is a two-way street. Is a community or a diocese discerns with the person that is discerning, right? But it's important, especially for people with disabilities, to have those opportunities, because if I wouldn't have been welcome in some religious communities and to like go visit them, then I wouldn't have had the chance to like see what religious life was really like, and then I wouldn't have had the chance to really discern. And so I think that more opportunities should be encouraged for people with disabilities to really have the chance, like anybody else, to really go and see, right? Like, we're not asking like, oh, can I just move into the convent tomorrow, or whatever, because that's not how it works. But at least to have the chance, just like any other person, to discern, because like many people that I know have said, God is the one who calls, right? And so yeah. And then lastly, what I really want to see done, and I'm trying to maybe think on ways on how to do this, is to have some sort of network of people with disabilities that can really help other people with disabilities. So some sort of like mentorship kind of deal, because when I was discerning religious life, for example, I was able to connect with 2 blind sisters. So it was very nice and very helpful, because like I could ask them questions that I couldn't have asked anybody else. So for example, sister, what do you do when your religious order has recreation? Like, do you have, like, if they play, cards or other games, do you have games in Braille, or like, how do you do this, or like another sister, she had a guide dog. And so, like, how does that work with the vow of poverty? And so they were able to like really guide me and to really tell me things that other people wouldn't have been able to tell me, because they are not blind themselves, so they may not know the answer to that. And like, that doesn't mean, I mean, like, we need all sorts of mentors, right? Like, we need disabled mentors, we need non-disabled mentors, but I think that there is value to of both, of having both, right? Like, if somebody's in a wheelchair and they want to go on a mission trip, they may have questions like, how can I walk through, or like use a wheelchair through the jungle? I mean, I don't know how to do that, because I'm not in a wheelchair, but like, maybe somebody else who has done something similar knows. And so I think there is a value on sharing those resources and ideas between people. Yeah. And like, there is definitely a lot of work to be done, but I think that the church is heading on the right direction. And I'm happy to be of service in whatever way I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you. I was just reading through the document today on the continental stage, the working document for the synod, and paragraph 36 of that document says, numerous reports point to the lack of appropriate structures and ways of accompanying persons with disabilities, and call for new ways of welcoming their contribution and promoting their participation. In spite of its own teachings, the church is in danger of imitating the way society casts them aside. The forms of discrimination listed, the lack of listening, the violation of the right to choose where and with whom to live, the denial of the sacraments, abuse and others, describe the culture of rejection towards persons with disabilities. They do not arise by chance, but have in common the same root, the idea that the lives of persons with disabilities are worth less than others. And that's quoting the report of the Special Synodal Consultation of Persons with Disabilities by the Dicastery for Laity, Family and Life. So that's in the working document now for the continental stage on the synod. So thank you very much for your contribution. I'm just curious, what are your, I know you've had a semester in Krakow that's been very enriching for you. What are your plans next?
So in a week, I will be going back to the US. And in a couple of weeks, I am going to start my master's at the University of St. Thomas in Houston. I am attending in a couple of weeks also. It's called the SIC conference, and it's sponsored by the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. And so it's kind of like the youth symposium that you and I went to, but like much bigger. It's like 20,000 college students, and there are a ton of keynotes and breakout sessions, and I'm very excited about it.
Oh, wonderful. Fantastic. And that's not Focus, is it? Focus.
Yes, here it is.
Oh, excellent. Well, excellent. Fantastic. So we might just open the forum if there's any questions or discussion that anyone would like to raise with Anna, or just to discuss. I think that's an important. Oh, Esther, yes.
Oh, well, thank you, Anna.
No problem.
Yeah, really very interesting, and I would really like you, our association, the NAT Association, to hear what you had to say. And just to say, the schools that I visit, we are blessed in the sense that there is some very good religious education available for people with disabilities. And a lot of it would have come from the United States, especially the Jesuits, like an adaptive program. I'm just wondering what you would think of an adaptive program, say for children with needs, that but teachers do need guidance and do need help in the classrooms, like what you are saying, to be treated as other children. It's a whole new level from how we are doing it.
Yeah, so thank you for your comment. First, I think that adapted programs have their place. There may be some students who learn maybe by doing, or who just learn differently, maybe because of their disability. And so I definitely think that adapted programming can also be very, very good. You know, I don't know if there is a program that can explain the truths of the faith in a way that is not watered down, but yet simple enough for people maybe with intellectual disabilities, for example. So that could be very, very helpful. Again, I don't know if there is such a thing, but if there is, I think that's really great. And I do agree. I agree that there maybe there needs to be some guidance as far as like, okay, catechists or teachers, you know, they want to treat people with disabilities like everybody else, but like maybe they don't know how to, or how to approach it, right? And so I think that there has to be more guidance on maybe how to do it. Maybe some like disability awareness, some sort of workshops. I think that the biggest thing is for catechists or other people to ask and connect with people who have disabilities, because they are the ones who know, you know, more about their disability and you know how they want to be treated, I guess. So I think there has to be more of a dialogue between people with disabilities and catechists.
Thank you. Yeah. And I would be just thinking that also that we need to hear more from the people themselves, maybe rather than myself thinking this is what would be good for you, or this is what, you know, we would need. But it's just wonderful. I remember doing a course, it must be about 20 years ago, that really blew my whole mind and understanding open. It was called It's Our Church Too. And it was a big conference that was held in Dublin. I mean, I'm living here in Ireland, Anna. And, yeah, and it was such an awakening that people with different, you know, issues and needs spoke. It was the first time that, because I would feel that some of us here would have felt that the people with certain disabilities, let's say, weren't capable of receiving the sacraments. Now, I don't mean yourself, but, you know, others. So a lot done, but a lot more to do. That's what I would feel.
Exactly. I agree with you. There has a lot, many good things that have already been done. I know Pope Francis recently launched a campaign for people with disabilities. I think it's called, what's it called? It's like We Are Church.
Yes.
And so I would love to see, I haven't like read much into it, but I would love to see if there have been any other developments regarding that campaign.
And I also know that Rose Kennedy put quite a few, I think more than €1 million into because of her own child now who's an adult, you know, all the truths of our faith. Now, unfortunately, a lot of it you couldn't use here at the moment because the language would be so out of date, you know, referring to people with language is constantly being updated for people with disabilities. But it is a huge, broad church, and personally, I think that we could all do with hearing from people themselves, like what you said.
Exactly. And I also think that there is also a lack of maybe empowerment or encouragement towards people with disabilities. I was blessed enough to have a family that really treated me normal and like encouraged me to do just things that people my age were doing. And I was blessed to receive extra training and different things to like really believe in myself and to even help others believe in themselves. But sadly, many times people with disabilities themselves, they may not think that they can do things. They may not think like, oh, I cannot learn, or like, oh, I can never go on a mission trip, or like, they may not have the opportunities nor the skills to do these things. And so I think it's important for us to, as a church, to maybe provide some of that. Like, yes, we may not be, specialists in any specific area, but like, just encouraging people, and like making them see that they have inherent value, because that's also like a big thing. Many people with disabilities think themselves that they don't have a lot of value just based on how society has treated them in the past. And so I think it's important for us as a church to be like, yes, you actually matter and you are valued, and like there are many possibilities for you, even if you don't believe in yourself. And so I think that's also like a very big thing.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? We're currently working on a new resource, Anna, for 12 to 15-year-olds in its relationships and sex education for Catholic schools. So and it was originally written as a textbook, but we've adapted for, it's now kind of PowerPoints and embedded videos. So it's kind of I suppose multimedia, but they're going to be PowerPoints where the teachers can download it. It's going to be freely available. But I suppose how can we make it more accessible for people with disabilities, even in terms of worksheets or things like that? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So in my case, for example, I have a program that can read everything in my computer. So PowerPoints and things like that, I can read them. And so something that I would do if I was a catechist there is I would send by email to the blind student the PowerPoint. And so like in that way, he or she knows exactly what is being displayed up front. And yeah, like same thing with worksheets and things like this. There was one time that I went on a retreat, and the retreat director, he told me that they had like a booklet with some reflection questions and many other things, some of the songs for mass and things. And so he sent that to me by email, and it was very nice because I was able to read along and to like really have the same access that everybody else was having. So I think I cannot speak for every other disability, but like just asking the person or the parents like, hey, how can I do this? Or like, there are things that don't need to be modified at all. Like for example, videos. As a blind person, I can watch videos like based on the audio and like on the dialogue. I can many times have a pretty good idea on what's happening. So I think it depends, but the biggest key is to communicate with the student, communicate with the parents if the student is maybe too young, or with both, but just ask them what they need, because for me, electronic formats work really well, right? But like maybe for another blind person, it may not. They may have something else that works best for them. So communication is the biggest thing.
And like you say, it's co-responsibility, particularly in terms of, and that's what really impressed me about when I met you in Krakow, in the way that you volunteered for, you stepped up in terms of taking notes for our group, for presenting to the conference based on our working group. So that was a beautiful witness that you gave there, and I think that's important what you say in terms of that came out of that symposium of empowering people, and particularly young people, and giving them co-responsibility, and like you said, with mentoring as well, with some kind of mentoring or guidance. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it was important. I partially, I mean, of course, I volunteered and went up front because I wanted to do it, but partially I also did it because I knew that many of these people had never seen a disabled person volunteering for anything. And so I knew that, like, if I did it, they may get a good impression, and then they will go back to their countries and, like, maybe think of people with disabilities as equals.
Yeah. Thank you for the beauty of your witness. And I wish you continued success in your studies, going back to the States. And thank you for the input that you've given us this evening.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and I do hope we can meet again. And if there is anything else I can do, I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
And just to say that the recording of this webinar, we will post it up on Catholic Faith Formation Ireland YouTube channel with the 8 previous webinars that we've been running this year on the directory for catechesis. And this brings to conclusion our webinar series. Thank you all for joining us. I know it's coming up to Christmas, everyone's very busy, but I really appreciate you turning out tonight, and wish you all a blessed and peaceful Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you.